Hey, welcome to the Blue Ball Report. I'm your host, Digger. We're trying something very different today. I have a very special guest to be chatting with today who's going to come on soon. And I just want to tell you what I've been up to lately. So I've been spending a lot of time focusing on studying for the sex and relationship coaching, which I am totally loving. And I think you're going to love it too. And that's taking a lot of my time these days. And I'm spending a lot of my time right now investigating and investing in blockchain technologies. If you had the chance to go back to 1992 and buy stock in Amazon, you'd be a fool not to. Right now, what's happening in blockchain technologies is something along those lines. So I'm currently in the process of trying to figure out how I can help people. I want the people in my community, people who subscribe to my channel and share my values, our values, to benefit from this exciting new boon that's happening this year. So I'm currently in the process of figuring out what kind of offering I can give to people that will help you, as well as sustain me through the process of helping you and make it something that works for everyone. If you are interested in finding out more about this, I encourage you to subscribe to my email list. Go to subscribe.blueballreport.com. I send email subscribers typically an email once a week, usually on Wednesday or Thursday, to tell them about the announcement that's coming up. So today I will have a special guest on. I'll just introduce Alex, aka Giggles. Thank you, Alex, for coming on the show.
Thank you for having me. I feel so
Welcome to the Blue Ball Report. My first special guest, Alex, aka Giggles, is one of my very, very, very best friends here in San Francisco. I've known you for I met you 2010, but we got really close a few years ago, about 3 years ago. And you're just like one of my favorite people because you're both really deep and meaningful, and you can also be shallow and superficial. No, I mean, you can be fun and stuff. So Giggles is a healer, and he does amazing body work, magic with his hands. What's your website again?
Somasyn, SOMASYN.com.
Yeah, he does so much with his hands. It's a lot of healing work in terms of physical and mental. But he's only in San Francisco now. You're leaving us at the end of this month, going to Portland.
Yeah, just a couple more weeks, I know.
Well, anyone who's in Portland, you're really lucky to have Alex come and see you. Come there, and if you need body works, he also works out. Tell them a little bit about your work that you do. So what's so magical about your massage work? Because it's very different than what most people think of as massage.
Well, thanks for giving me a little opportunity to talk about it. So I work with stored emotion and trauma in the body. And as bodies, we often forget to acknowledge the parts of ourselves that can be impacted by hard moments in life, however serious those might be. Oftentimes in therapeutic settings, we address the mind, but we don't really have a lot of language around addressing the body. And oftentimes it's actually the body that takes on and holds more impact than even the mind does. And it's also there's an ability to actually take the trauma away from the body, therefore taking it out of the mind as well, or just transforming that relationship. And so that's what I do with folks. I kind of work with their bodies both on a physical massage therapist level, but also on the mental, emotional level as well.
Yeah, it's like stored emotions in the body. You're helping them release.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. I started thinking of terms, and I don't know if this is a quick terminology, but I started thinking we in our culture, we often have a synonymous brain and mind. And now I'm starting to think in terms of the brain's here, but our mind is in our brain, it's in our heart, it's in our gut, it's in our genitals. And it's all of it, and we kind of make that assumption, and you're kind of like, I'm addressing the mind that's all the way through your entire body,
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's oftentimes we're like, oh, I have the gut instinct, or I felt so much. And you point to right here, and you're literally saying that. You're like, I felt so much. And you're like, that's literally a different part of your body speaking, saying something. And it's because those parts of our bodies are saying something.
Yeah. They're telling you something, so listen. I know if I don't listen to my gut, my gut knows better than I do. So, yeah.
It's really kind of a lot of what I'm learning in the program that I'm doing with Somatica. It's a lot of like helping people tap into what does your mind tell you, what does your heart tell you, what does your gut tell you, what does your junk tell you, which is I know my jewels. What do your jewels tell you? Um, so I think today there's so many fun things that Alex and I can talk about, and I hope to get you back on in future shows. But today we kind of decided to talk about sort of relationship structures. And talk about the whole monogamy versus polyamory versus open relationships. I just kind of want to give the viewers a little bit of like my history and experience, and then I'd love to hear from you, Alex, your history experience, and then we'll discuss. I used to, I grew up, and had many monogamous relationships. It wasn't until San Francisco that I moved and met a lot of, I grew up in Michigan, so it was quite conservative. And so monogamy was my jam for a long time, and then obviously gay men in San Francisco, a lot of open relationships, which just to anyone who's watching and doesn't know exactly what it means, you probably already do, but specifically that means like sort of being emotionally, generally, and it means being emotionally monogamous to one person, but having agreements about being able to play on the side. And then there's also what I came to learn about sort of in the early noughties, around 2004, of course, was reading The Ethical Slut and learning about polyamory, which just blew my mind. But even at that time, I was like, oh no, I'm not polyamorous. I think maybe the open relationships I could do, but monogamous, emotionally monogamous for me. And then I had a turning point in 2008, a certain experience where I was like, no, I think I'm more poly. And I personally felt like, I had a lot of fantasies of what it'd be like to have more than one relationship structures. And we don't have that. We don't have those role models in this really in our world. So a lot of us are kind of like feeling our way through it. But what I find really interesting is that there's a real, since 2008, I've had a couple relationships where we tried to be polyamorous or open, and one was really great and worked well, and the other one was not. What I found really interesting is that my time here since 1999, the change, like in early noughties, it felt like there was very few people in my experience I interacted with who were down for more than one relationship at the same time. Open relationships, sure, but it just seemed like that was a minority. And now it seems like everyone's poly. It's all the rage. And it's, I know it's, that's really challenging for monogamists like you, Giggles. And, I already gave away, spoiler alert, I gave it away. He's monogamous. But I'll let you tell your sort of story and realizations and how you deal with that. I'd love to hear how you deal with that here in San Francisco.
Yeah. So a little bit about my history and everything. I really I came out, and then very soon after that, I moved to Boston, and I was very much so on a spiritual path, and in many ways I still am. But back then I was pretty rigid about it, and actually I had gone celibate for like 2 years, and I met someone who I considered a soulmate. And this person was pretty ahead of his time, I think, and was wanting to be open. And because of the love that we shared, it was something out of this world. It was really something very, very special. I had no jealousy around any of it. I walked in on him having sex with someone once, and I thought I would be surprised, but actually I was like, oh, good, you're having a good time. And I was like about to leave. I was like, oh, I'll talk to you in a little bit. And he was like, oh, no, Alex, I want you to stay. He can go. And I felt a little weird about it. I was like, oh, wow. But also he made me feel so special and actually more wanted, more like I was the important thing in all of that. He was just having fun. And I think what I've found more often than not in my personal experiences with open and being in San Francisco, where I've only dated men who really ultimately want that, in spite of me saying, I often state up front, I only want an open, or I only want a monogamous relationship. And guys, because they want to be with me or because of whatever, who knows, they're like, yeah, yeah, sure. And then like 2 or 3 months into it, they're like, actually, I want to be open. And I'm like,
Girl, I told you this
yeah.
is a monogamous train, Haney. Yeah.
Yeah. You jumped on the wrong train.
Bye-bye.
But that, even that in and of itself is a huge breach in trust and in communication and all of it. It's like the one thing that I said I really want is all of a sudden the one thing that you say you're not down with, and that part for me is very is a big part, is a big piece of why I don't want why I'm not interested in open or poly relationships. That said, part of what it is for me is I think that there's different ways that we can work in relationship, and relationship has a lot of different outlets and ways that we can work through it. One of those ways is, let's do the work of being open. And some people I think are naturally really good at that and maybe even predisposed for open relationships, while others of us are actually more naturally predisposed for monogamous relationships. And I don't actually see it as being one way or the other way is right or wrong or better or worse. It's actually just what's right for the couple. And so I think it's it's one of those things where really know yourself, know what it is you're looking for, trust what you want, and there's not anything wrong with what you want. You should get it.
Yeah, and I totally agree with you. And I feel like also we live in a society that so thwarts people knowing themselves, you know what I mean? Because there's so much expectations on people. So a couple of things, like, first of all, life is a journey, so we can learn things about ourselves and grow and change, like I did, where I was like, oh, this is a possibility. But there's also there's such a paradigm and expectations on people that they're kind of prevented from being able, like my goal in life, I'm realizing, is helping other people find their authentic selves and live their authentic truth. And ideally we would have sex ed that would help young people kind of figure out, like, do you think you want to be monogamous or polyamorous or a big old slut? Like, what do you want to be? And if they can do that without shame, people can live their truth, and they don't have to come to relationships and have all this baggage of trying to fit on something. I feel like that's one of the things that happens. Is there is a mononormativity in our society, and people who are not monogamous are the outcasts, and a lot of them want to fit in, and they have different pressures, and so they try to, okay, I'll be that. And so then they go into relationships and they'll cheat on people rather than just being able to just say, this is who I am, this is what I want, this is what I need, and does that work, and stuff like that. So I totally agree with you. I want people to be able to live authentically, and that's kind of the goal of the work I want to do too. So
I think there's another piece to it, and on both ends, that where I've run into with open people, that they're, before they even settle into a relationship or settle into something, there are people often are already trying to run out and not actually be in relationship, or they'll say they want to be in an open relationship when they're trying to escape a dynamic of the relationship, where they're like, oh my God, this is getting really intense, I want to be open. And and so and so like there's that part of it too that I think is really important to acknowledge, is emotionally in society we don't do a really good job of communicating and naming that things are hard or things are taking a shift in relationship. We as people are destined for change. If we're not changing, we're dying. And for a lot of people, that change can scare people into running or avoiding something. And a big part of why I've also resisted being open is I notice people avoiding rather than moving deeper in to be open, because I think it's something I could actually be okay with, given my first example, but it has to be a really, really well held container, and unless
Safe.
that, I'm not in.
Yeah, I think the key word I'm hearing there, and I totally agree with you, is like the avoidant. People with the avoidant attachment style, they use it as a way to avoid. That happens, and I would say also that's not everybody, right? So, and so would you. I know you'd agree with me. So it's something to be very aware of. Like, are you using this as avoidant? And what I think one of the interesting conversations we've had in the past was there's this whole notion of like, do we start off, do we, there's the choice of I want to be monogamous forever. And then there's a choice of I've heard people say, I want to be open, but after we've built a safe container in the safe monogamous zone, then we can shift into open, which has its own benefits and its own challenges. And I've also, and I'm not saying I have all the answers here, and I don't even have the answers for myself. It would be a charlatan to say I have the answers for other people. So I'm just in this self exploration. But I did have a relationship where we started out open from the get go, and I was like straight up on the first date. I'll say to someone, I don't do monogamy. Now, mind you, I'll do monogamy in times when our relationship needs that kind of repair or focus. If there's something going on emotionally or physically with both of us or it needs it, yeah, I'll do temporary monogamy. If there's COVID, yeah, crazy times, crazy measures, right? But so it's not like totally, but it's just like in general, I want to move back towards at least having an open relationship. I'm still curious about having secondary lovers and stuff like that, which is kind of not something I've been able to, hasn't happened yet. But I think that what you're talking about is like you want to lay a foundation of like you want to build that trust and build that security before you move into a place of an open relationship. Whereas I'm kind of still, and I shared this with you already. I like to see, because I have dated, I did date someone who from day one I said, "You're great." I said, "But I just want you to know I don't do monogamy." And I did give him the same caveats that I just said. But just so you know, like if you want monogamy, I fully support that. I don't need to convert you and tell you you're wrong. I want you to do what's right for you. But I don't want you to date me thinking you're going to get monogamy from me, because that's just we're barking on. And he was a young guy, so he was like, "Oh yeah, no, yeah, I'm down," And he was young enough to not really know himself, and he was down to try it. It sounds great, and sure, he likes to fuck other people too. Who doesn't? When it's so he sort of we tried it and went along that path of trying the open relationship. And I was glad that I was able to see, we were able by trying it, I was able to see that actually, no, we can't do an open relationship. Whereas I think if we had gone the route of being monogamous, that would work for a while. And then when we transitioned to open relationship, it would have been like, oh, actually, that's not what we can do. So, and yet I also agree with what you're saying, like, when we talked about that, is like not having open relationship doesn't mean anything goes. You know what I mean? And if you're starting a relationship and anything goes, well, how are you going to build that security? And so what you've taught me in that conversation is like maybe it's good to have like a little bit of both. Like, okay, we're going to start out open, but that doesn't mean like any willy-nilly like I want to have like committed times with you where we are intentional. So let's say we start dating, I want to be like, how would if I would want to be like, I want to have an open relationship, but I still want to I want to foster our sort of trust. I want to focus on us. And so maybe that's something that we can compromise on first. Maybe it's to start out, it's open relationship. How would like, you can be with someone else once a month, or how about we set, Friday and Saturday, our date nights, we know is us monogamous, and we sort of keep a cap on it that makes sure that we're really focusing on us. And then we can kind of, because I want to test the waters and see this person and myself, we can do the open relationship thing, because it's always going to have jealousy and all these other issues we have to work through. And I want to know straight up before I make the emotional investment with someone that I love, that they can do that we can do that. And because it's not easy. It's worth it. To me, it's worth it. But it's never going to be easy. But so I want to thank you for like kind of putting that in my mind. Like, yeah, like there's a compromise there to build that up and also test the waters on the open front.
Yeah.
So
Yeah. And, also something that I'm just now learning, just as as I mature and turn into an adult, even though I love to say we're all like little kids running around in adult bodies. And I really feel that sometimes, but some of like a piece of that is really accepting that there is no wrong. I think, it's like my last partner, he really was like trying to make me wrong for not wanting open. And I kept trying to be like, no, that's just like, it's just not me. And he was like, well, that's because you're like this and this and this. And maybe you just have to work through these issues. And I'm like, no, like that's not actually what's happening. And I think as we, and this is something that I think the whole world needs, is just more acceptance of the differences that make us up. It's actually really beautiful if you can actually sit in someone else's difference and hold appreciation for it, rather than it becoming a wrong thing or something that's bad. It's actually so beautiful to see the fabric of people, of humanity.
The diversity, this is how we respect diversity.
Yeah.
But we also like grow up in a culture where a lot of us, especially men, we're enculturated to be right. I have to be right. In order for mine to be right, you need to be wrong. And it takes emotional maturity to realize that, like you said, there's no right or wrong. Absolutely. There's right or wrong for you. What's right or wrong for you? And a lot of people make this assumption, and I know I did it in the past, and I'm prone to do it, so I'm aware of it now, to make this assumption that there's some sort of objective right and wrong. And in a lot of cases, and in a lot of situations, it's like there isn't. It's what's right or wrong for you, So
yeah. A big learning piece for me was defining for myself the difference between judgment and discernment. And judgment is making the other person wrong for, and discernment is meaning that it's not right for me.
I love that.
Yeah, it's been such a piece that, like, even when I'm questioning, I'm like, oh, am I being judgmental or am I just being discerning? And I'm like, and it's really helped me to step more into discernment.
Yeah.
It's not like, oh, they suck, they're the worst. It's more just like, oh no,
Yeah.
that's just not my gig. Cool.
I love that. That's a great takeaway, judgment versus discernment, What I've also found too is a lot of people get just triggered. I know I was speaking to someone who's very monogamous about my my sluthood, and they got triggered and they started getting like, oh, you're wrong, blah blah blah, and so there becomes like a level of understanding of seeing, oh, you're triggered because maybe you've been cheated on, or maybe you've been, your family broke up, or you don't want that, and you're afraid that if people start wanting that, your partner is going to come to you and want that, and so they'll get like, oh, that's all wrong, we can't do that, we need to live in a world where everyone's just like me so I feel safe, and so you can kind of start to see that's like, okay, you're getting triggered there, and what I want to point out to them is like, you acting like that only puts the sluts in the closet. And then when the sluts are in the closet, they play the monogamous game because that's what society's telling them, to be monogamous. So they go ahead and fake it and go along with it, but they can't resist their slutty urges, and they go land up cheating and ruining things. Whereas if you just allowed people to be themselves, they could tell you up front, you could filter them out and not have that instance. So we're creating the dysfunctionality. The mononormativity is creating that dysfunctionality itself too.
Yep. And that's, I mean, that's with all aspects of life. The more that we like steer away someone else and tell someone else they're wrong, the more that it's going to actually be harder to differentiate between what's right for us, because everyone's going to be closeted about their various things. And it's like, we can't shame others for being who they are. I mean, we can shame, like,
unless they're a Republican.
Yeah.
They get the shame exemption. No, I'm sure there's some nice, honestly conservatives in the Republican Party.
Probably that too. Yeah, I think I've met one or two. Oh wait, no.
Well, this has been a really interesting conversation. I love I love connecting with my, monogamous brothers and just sharing this sort of thing, rather than telling you you're wrong. You taught me something and your perspectives about that, which I'm going to take forward. And, you know, I don't know. We don't have the examples. We don't have the role models. I'm learning and reading, which, by the way, I just want to make a plug for the book Polysecure to anyone who's watching this. It just came out last October, and it's about the attachment theory for polyamorous couples. But it's honestly, even if you're not polyamorous, reading the way the author articulates what attachment theory is something I've never heard it explained this way. It's phenomenal, and it's like talking about how to make these secure attachments in a polyamorous dynamic. But I love like being able to talk about it honestly, rather than like shaming each other in judgment that like we need different things. And who knows, like I'm still learning and evolving. Like at first I was like, oh, maybe it'll be like, maybe my polyamorous would be like me and like some equal throuple. Or then it was like, oh, maybe I'll have a primary with some secondaries, or, maybe I'll have chicken with rice. I don't know. You know what I mean? I'm still kind of figuring that out, but
Yeah.
but
I think they're good. A second book to plug on the other end is Wired for Love. I know you've read this one too, but it's also a really good book just to understand relationship dynamics. And kind of what I took from it, a big takeaway was like really trusting my own process and helping to differentiate between what another person wants and what I want, and being able to make those two happen if it's a healthy relationship.
yeah, yeah. And yeah, he also wrote Wired for Dating, which is kind of a helpful way to find secure partners in the dating life. And so I'm curious to the viewers, like, what do you think about polyamory versus open relationships versus monogamous? What works for you? What questions do you have?
Come out. Come out as you are.
Just be who you are.
This is a space for you to come out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm also lucky to live in a place, in San Francisco, where we can be honest about being polyamorous with almost everyone here. But there's a large swath of the world and country where people gotta keep it on the DL. They will get shamed, they could get fired, and there's a real toxic mononormativity that a lot of people suffer. And our hope is, but San Francisco is a bellwether of this in a lot of ways, and the things are changing very much, definitely, especially amongst the younger generation. So with that, I think we'll wrap up, unless you wanted to say anything else to our
Thank
viewers.
you so much for having me on. It was really nice to have this conversation with you.
Thank you, Giggles, for coming and adding to the conversation. So I'm just going to wrap this up and say this is a whole new kind of style of Blue Ball Report, and I'm currently in the experimental phase. As I told you at the beginning of the show, I'm really working on a lot of other things. So I'm going to be trying new ways of bringing you content that is easier and more interesting, and it really helps me if this is the kind of style or content you like. It really helps by fucking that like button. Get your dick out, your clit out, whatever. Fucking finger bang the like button, okay? That helps. And if you hadn't hit the subscribe button, be sure to do that for weekly content. And as I said in the beginning of the episode, go to subscribe.blueballreport.com, get on the email list, and I'll tell you more about my whole crypto adventures if you're interested. And I'm going to let my co-host say farewell.
Farewell and fuck well.